Hey guys, what is up? It's Hunter Bick with DragTheBar.com, and this is part two of my of the extensive match I played against Barney Boatman this weekend, and we're just gonna jump right in. As you can see, this part and all the parts after this are gonna be with live video and delayed commentary, so we don't have to use the hand replayer anymore. So we will get some timing tells and stuff like that, which is cool. So just to review a little bit what we saw in the last one, I've been aggressive. In the end of the last video, I made some very thin value bets, which got called by even thinner calling hands. And just because Barney does not have a lot of respect for my image right now, and he just thinks I'm very bluffy. He did call me down with King High at one point on an Ace High board. He did. He's made some other thin call downs. He's also been attacking paired boards and ace high boards with check raises. And I haven't really 3-bet him yet after he check raise, but I have done a lot of floating. And for the most part, my floats have been very successful. He also has been folding a lot to my c-bet after I 3-bet him. So with that, let's get to the action. So what we have here, I just opened King 4 on the button, and c-bet pot, of course, because I've flopped a really big draw. And he goes ahead and check raises. You know, I think a lot of people just will immediately think that they need to be 3-betting here. And I think 3-betting is okay. But with position and, you know, everything else that's going on, we know how light his check raises have been. But I just think here I can use my position as a more profitable line. Because I think if I 3-bet, he's either going to fold or we're going to get all in. He's going to have either an overpair or a 5. In either situation, I'm not going to have an edge. I'm either going to be flipping against an overpair, or I'm going to have like 25% equity against 28% equity against trips. So, you know, there's really not like a great situation that can come of that. Whereas if I call, I can either extract more value, or I can make him fold when I miss my hand on a later street. The latter being very important. Plus, I want to just call here with a big hand because I need to balance this play, because so far when I float his check raises and bet the turn, it's been like 90% air in my range. So I need to strengthen that range and get some balance in there too. So with that, I just decide to call and hit my flush on the turn, which is cool. And he immediately checks. And I decide to make a bet that looks just like my floats. You know, I think I bet like 180 here, something in there. 190. It needed to look similar to what my float bets had looked like. And he just folds. So, even more evidence that he just likes to attack paired boards from out of position. Which is okay. I mean, it's a good play, but like when you do it every time the board is paired, it becomes pretty transparent pretty quickly. And you're just going to open yourself up to get rebluffed, either via a float or a 3-bet. So the other thing to note is that my stats are a little bit tighter than I thought they had been when I made the first part, and so I'm playing fairly tight, which I think is a good approach against somebody who's playing this loose. You know, when somebody's playing 71% of their big blind hands against you, you have to be a little bit tight, just because they're never going to be folding pre-flop. Now, if they're folding to a c-bet a ton, then you can be real loose. But, you know, if they're making some check raises and they're floating you, and he's only folding to about 45% of c-bets, so I decided just to play a little tighter game. Not to mention, he has very little respect for me and has called me down very light a few times, so I need to be in there with strong hands on average. So I think a slightly tighter style is a good approach here. So he check raises me like he does on, you know, a lot of boards. I think here on a board this dry, I mean, I think that floating is great. I just think it misses him a lot. So I'm kind of wondering what to do at this point. And I decide to float. You know, mostly I have a backdoor flush draw, and I've just had such a high degree of success with with this play against him. You know, it's just worked a very large amount of the time. So I hit my jack, and now I've got some showdown value. And we've seen him in the past get passive with a draw out of position. He'll make a play, and then he'll back off and get defensive with that draw. So I think I can get value from hearts, and he, if he has a king, that's fine. He's still going to be defensive, but I could also get value from like a 7. So I like to bet 100. And again, it's great to have a hand like this in my turn value bet range after I call a check raise. I'm really smoothing my range out here, so there aren't really any holes in it. And if that hand got to showdown, he'd see that I was betting that just like I was betting my bluffs, and and even though he doesn't know, I'm betting my flushes like that too. All right, so I have 5-4, and so you see some notes here. I didn't realize this guy was a red pro, and I looked him up on table ratings, and well, let's just say after that I put that note on him in there. I definitely wouldn't consider this guy a fish, but I also doubt that online heads up is his best game either. So I decided to float. Excuse me, not float. I just call. I check call. He c-bets quite a bit, 2/3, and I have the best hand here a lot. And he has not double-barreled me much. We see his 2-barrel stat. It's on the 3rd line, 2nd in, and it's only at 30%. That's right around about the amount of times he's going to have a pair. And the problem with calling here, I think I have the best hand a decent amount. The problem is he can value bet a 7. He can have a queen. He could have a better 5. But he also could have one of all these draws. And if a draw gets there, I'm not going to know whether if a draw gets there, I can fold. But if the draw doesn't get there, I'm going to have to make a decision whether he's bluffing a withdraw on the river, which, even though I don't think he would do very often, is still a possibility, or if he's value betting a made hand. So I'm just not going to know. And I just think that situation has a lot of reverse implied odds, and I'm better off just folding the turn and getting away from it. I think the flop call is fine considering how often this guy checks back the turn. Against some opponents, I wouldn't even call there. I would either fold or check raise. But against Barney, I think it's fine. So, all right. So now he's 3-betting me again, and we discussed in the. I guess we can recap the last video just a tad. We mentioned in the last video what his range, his 3-betting range is. It's a lot of suited connectors, small pairs. What else? He's got a lot of Broadway cards, that kind of thing. So King Queen is very standard. And obviously we know that like the Deuce 7-7 board misses like a ton of his range, and it's just like the easiest board in the world to float a 3-better with. And he always c-bets after he 3-bets. He does it a lot anyway. But he checks the turn with a very high degree of frequency in the same spot. So when he double barrels me here, I can just pitch it. He just has not double barreled me really at all after 3-betting. So I think that's an easy fold. My float didn't work. Nice hand. All right, so open Jack 9. Flop open-ended, which is cool. And I go ahead and just bet pot, just so I can try to get this pot built. Should I hit my draw? If he check raises me, it's no problem at all. Between my ability to take the pot away later unimproved and my ability to hit my draw, I could call it very, very easily. I'm going to try to not pause the action as much as I might for like a 1-part heads up video, because every part after this is about 45 minutes of raw play, and that means with commentary they could all easily surpass an hour, and I want to keep the length reasonable. So I'm going to, I'll get back to that. Okay, standard c-bet there. So I'm going to try to keep the length reasonable. I know occasionally I can get kind of long-winded. That's also something I'm working on. But if I do miss anything, don't be afraid to just head to the forum and hit the video thread with a question. And you know, I, I I try to answer everybody's questions. And if I do happen to miss one, then just send me a private message in the forum, and I will check it out for you. Okay, so not a whole lot going on in the last few hands. I defend Jack 9. I think this is against some people this would be a loose defense, but I think against Barney, I don't really have a problem with it. Um, I've done a decent job winning hands unimproved, so I feel like I can show a small profit here with it. And I haven't really done a lot of check raising, and I thought this was like a halfway decent board. I think I end up check raising this one. Yeah, I do. Thought it was a halfway decent board to check raise. You know, it's king high. It has a couple draws, but in general, we got to keep in mind he's raising an 80% range on the button, and in general, I just don't think he's gonna have a whole lot here. You know, whether I'm not sure he's gonna call me with like a 5. He might call me with a 6. So I'm just not sure how often he's gonna call here. And if he does, we can just give up. You know, it's okay. Um, you know, my image is definitely not very good. And if he calls me, I haven't check raised him yet, so or at least a whole lot. And I need to know how he's gonna respond. So if he calls me, then I can just wait to flop something and then check raise him again and have a predictive and have an understanding of how he's going to respond to it. So when this 6 rolls off, I'm just going to give up at this point. I don't think he's going to fold a flush draw. I don't think he's going to fold he's never folding a 6, a king, maybe not even a 5. I just, if he calls there. Okay, so check out the chat box real fast. I made a note just for the video. That was the first time he called a check raise. You know, I hadn't check raised him a whole lot yet, but that was the first time he'd called one. So I had done pretty well with it so far, and he's now called the first one. Okay. So we got 10s. And just make a normal C bet. One quick note, just like I'm trying to keep my bet sizes pre-flop consistent with medium strength hands and high strength hands, whether I raise to 20 or 30 pre-flop, I'm also trying to manage the size of my C bet to 40 or to full pot. Well, 2/3 or full pot. And with this hand, I think you can go either way. So I just stuck it in the 2/3 pot just to try to keep it consistent. So not the greatest turn card, but not a disaster, but definitely not something I want to build a pot with up a whole lot. You know, I think between other clubs, you know, another action killer like a 10 or a queen or something like that showing up, he's never going to fold a jack. He may fold a 9. I just didn't see a whole lot I was going to get value from here. You know, if he doesn't have like some sort of draw, I don't think I'm getting a ton of value from worse hands. So I just check it back. Decide maybe I can pick up a bluff on the river, or just see what he does. And I decided to just check back. Oh, no, I guess not. Never mind. Let's see what I end up doing, and we'll talk about it. Okay, so I bet 80, and I think it's good. I think, you know, we got to remember he would bet a king on the river. He would bet a jack on the river for sure. So that pretty much leaves us with, like, he could have a 9. He could have, like, pocket 8s. He could have God knows what else. Ace high. And our hand doesn't look very strong because we check back the turn. But I think he's just going to fold everything. If we can take a king and a jack out of his range, he's going to fold all of his air. So there's a piece of his calling range that we beat, and might as well try to get value from it. I mean, if he doesn't have a king or jack, we're not really worried about anything. So we can just value bet and just hope he shows up with a hand. And if he folds, he folds. You know, he just didn't have anything. So because I know his entire calling range is weak, I make a barely over half pot size bet because I want to give him something he can call. But he does fold. So we're playing 10-8 suited, almost for the same reason we played 8 Jack 9 off. This hand is a little bit better, being out of position. So I just fold it. I mean, we have a gut shot, but the flush is out there, and you know, my check raise didn't work a minute ago, and you know, I decided to just be tight on that hand, err on the tight side of things. We do raise the old queen deuce, and we don't flop a whole lot, so we're gonna see bet. Try to win this pot right here, and he snap folds. He is folding to like about half my c-bets now. That number has come up a little bit, and if he was folding to half my c-bets, I'm gonna be c-betting. Well, I'm going to continue to c-bet about 93% of the time, which is what I've been doing so far. So we raised sevens for a min raise. A pot would have been fine too with these stacks. You know, it really doesn't matter. You know, it might have even been a little bit better. So the times I do flop my set, I've got a bigger pot built. You know, I can call a 3-bet with either bet size very easily. So he does this thing where he 3-bets and then checks. Usually that means he's giving up, and it usually means I'm going to win the pot with a bet. So that's what I do. Oh, actually I check. All right, the checking is, I think a bet would have been fine, by the way. You know, I think playing this hand aggressively is probably a little bit better than checking. And I think I would have preferred a bet. I think I changed my mind in the last minute. And I'm sure I was thinking, he's just going to fold when I do that. So maybe I can get a bet out of him on the turn. If I check it back, maybe I can get him to bluff at it once. Because that's his thing. He likes to bluff at it once and then give up. So I was thinking at the time maybe that's what I could get him to do. So I do check back, and a king rolls off, which isn't like a great card. But we do have to keep in mind how wide this guy's 3-betting range is. You know, we do have a ton of low cards, small pairs, suited connectors. We do have Broadway hands. And he does end up, I think he bets 90 pretty quickly. So just pause it again. A couple options here. We could just fold. We could also float him. You know, the whole reason we checked back was to try to induce some action, and now we're getting action. And I don't really like folding. I think if it was an ace, maybe we could make a better case for it. But given that the line we've taken, you know, we've played the hand to induce action. I don't really like just giving up now. Because look at it this way. He's not going to bet a jack or an 8 here. So he either has a king or he doesn't. And in a 20% range, there just aren't a lot of kings in there. So I think we need to peel once and see what happens. We know he doesn't double barrel on a bluff a lot, simply because he doesn't double barrel much at all. So I decide to take another card and try to show the hand down. The goal here is to try to check the hand back, actually. No, I take that back. The goal here is to get a better idea of his range, and then we can act accordingly. So he checks very quickly. Now, I find this very interesting, because if he had a king, what king on this board is not going to bet the river after betting the turn? You know, a lot of these kings have 2-pair. Ace-king's going to bet. You know, so it doesn't make his check here, I think, is like a total white flag. If I were him, I think I would have absolutely bet this river after betting that turn. Because when I check the flop back, how much of a hand do I have? You know, and then I call. I'm not showing. I'm showing a hand. I'm showing like a hand with showdown value or some sort of draw, and he should be betting here like always. But he doesn't, which is great. So what do we put him on now when he checks the river this fast? I can't put him on much. I can put him on a bluff. My concern, however, is that he could have a hand like 8-7 that he bluffed the turn with. He could have a hand like pocket 9s. So he could have been bluffing with a better hand. And if I bet here, I'm gonna fold him off all of his air anyway, which is cool. But even if I check back, I'm gonna beat those hands. So we need to bet, because there was a small part of his range he was bluffing with that still beats me. And those are hands we will fold out. Now, I guess there is going to be the rare time where he shows up with a hand like Queen Jack and they check to me, or he stubbornly won't let go of Jack 10. But those are also going to be times where he didn't play the hand. Where we've hand read this guy well enough that he doesn't have any of those hands very often. He would have had to have done something strange with them outside of his normal behavior. So we can assign a very low probability to hands like that. So basically, we're going to bluff because we're going to win the pot a lot when we check back anyway. But I think with a bluff, we're going to get rid of a chunk of his hands that he would have basically been bluffing with that are still better than us. So I decided to bet. I think it's a slightly higher EV line. I think when he takes this line, he just never has Broadway cards here. So I bet $200, and he folds quickly. But I think that hand is important because it's very easy to get into a habit in big 3-bet pots. It's easy to get into a habit where you play straightforward poker. And that is important not to do for the reason we just saw. We take some time to hand read, take some time to put the guy's range together, and then we realize that we're in a really great situation after all, even though we have pocket sevens on a 5 overcard board. So it's very important to, really make sure you're thinking things through. And when you take the time to do that, you're going to stumble across situations like that where you're in a much better spot than you initially realize. And that's how you make really profitable bluffs like that river bluff. All right, so this was a misclick, I believe. I was still multi-tabling at this time, and yeah, so that was a misclick. I apologize. At this point, I probably should just call here, but I think I was in a big pot on the other table, and I just felt like cutting my losses for my $5 mistake here and getting the next hand against Barney. I was in a couple huge 5-10 pots on a couple 6-max games. Very soon after, I think part 2. By the time we get to part 3 or I think by the time we get to part 3, I'm one-tabling Barney. So I one-tabled him for a good portion of this match. But I did have some good 6-max games I just couldn't get away from. So I had to do a little multitasking. All right, so here we get another misclick. I mean, it's pretty much in the same time frame. I was still in that big pot on the other table. And see, I think I hit time here to buy a little bit of time. And then come on, Hunter, let's get to it here. Basically, I'll get ahead of this hand. Basically, I end up min 3-betting him, which is another misclick. Fortunately, these are like the only 2 misclicks of this match, and it's not horrible for an 800 match hand. So I accidentally misclick, and he calls, of course. No one's going to fold to that. So important thing now is, there is something we can learn from this. Misclicks do happen. They are a part of online poker. Even very good players make them. So you can't just get frustrated yourself and then, give up on the hand. Take 2 seconds, say to yourself, yeah, this situation really sucks. What have I got myself into? And then move on. You've done it, deal with it, move on. Time to figure out how to play poker now. So so now we have 3-bet him with a pretty strong looking range. The guy doesn't really think we are. I think he thinks I'm kind of fishy because I've sucked out once or twice, and he definitely has not forgotten about that huge bluff I ran in part 1. So he thinks I'm over aggro and probably thinks I'm kind of fishy. So I don't c-bet. I probably should have c-bet this, to be honest. I'm not thrilled about the flop play. The turn play, however, the ace hits my range really, really hard, and he insta-checked back the turn, so I don't think he has a whole lot. And when the ace hits my range as hard as it does, I think I just need to bluff here. I just think I'm going to win the hand a lot. He really has not fought back in 3-bet pots against me, whether he's the 3-better or I'm the 3-better. So I think I just need to bet there, and we do take it down. All right, so king 6. We don't really have a hand, so actually, no, I decided to take a different approach here. Normally that would just be a c-bet just because we don't really have a hand, but we know Barney loves to check raise these boards. So I decided to rather to bet fold, because I'm getting check raise here a ton of the time because this guy loves to attack paired boards. So rather than do that and just hand him, 30 or 40 bucks, why not check back and try to win the pot another way? Because I'm not going to win this pot. I'm going to have to like bet 3-bet in order to win this pot if I bet the flop. But I can check back and try to win the pot on the turn of the river and take his little flop check raise away from him. So that's what I did. And now that he's checked the turn, I just decide to bet, and I do take it down. So we took the check raise away from him there on the flop, and that worked out pretty well. Maybe he was planning to check fold that flop anyway. I mean, who knows? But the important thing is that we made a little adjustment to deal with his high frequency of flop check raises on paired boards. Okay, so we get ace-8. And we're going to raise it eventually. There we go. Throw a min raise out there. Okay, so we flop a backdoor flush draw. Make my standard c-bet. And I just make a little half pot c-bet this time. Again, I want to have bluffs both in my full pot, 3/4 pot, and half pot bet size. And I wasn't too worried about getting check raised there just because the board was so dry. He generally has like some piece of the board. He'll have like bottom pair or mid pair or something like that. Okay, so obviously we're going to 3-bet this. This hand is big heads up. And he just folds. So I think I talked a little bit in the first video about, a lot of people just always, or in my other pot limit video, I talked about how people just like always peel 3-bets in pot limit. In pot limit Holdem, and how bad that is. But this guy folds a decent amount of them. So we flop top set, the nuts, which is great. So I bet here, hoping to get c-bet. Hoping to get check raised. And I made it like just my normal 2/3 bet size. I didn't want to scare his check raise away. That had been it's been my main bet size throughout this match as a c-bet. I didn't want to scare off his check raise, so that's what I bet. Fortunately, he came along. So now we have the question of, do we call or do we 3-bet? I think with these stacks, and considering that we're still playing pot limit, pot's only 200 bucks here. And if I call, it's going to leave 200 on the turn. 200 here. If I call, it's going to be another 70. So that's going to leave like 280 on the turn. And we're still going to have stacks of 950. So it's a pretty big stack to pot ratio to be on the turn with when we have top set and a hand we want to get all in with. So I need to inflate this pot so that we can get all in sooner than that. I'm going to have to go pot. In order to get for me, if I call here, in order to get all in by the river, I'm going to have to go pot, call, pot, call. And I don't know if I'm going to get 2 calls from 2 different pot bets. So, right. The river would be like, I guess, slightly smaller than pot. Anyway, I need to inflate this pot. Not to mention there are a lot of draws out there. And if a draw bricks on the turn, I think that he's just going to go away. But if it gets there, I'm going to get plenty of action from a better hand. So I see no reason whatsoever to try to get as much money as I can in on the flop while I have like overwhelming equity. So I make it almost a full pot raise, 350. And he's thinking, I'm hoping he just shoves his flush draw or his, 5-6, whatever he's got. Ace is an interesting card, I thought. So now the beauty of making that raise is now the stack to pot ratio is 1-1, and I can just shove the turn and get all in. So see what he does here. Then we'll talk about his range. All right, so he checks. So we can shove, or we can check back. I think that checking back does not offer us many advantages, if any, because if he has a hand like another set, or he somehow has 2 pair here, like ace-7 or something like that, and I shove here, he's going to call. If he has a draw and I shove here, he's probably going to fold. But if I check back, the same exact thing is going to happen, except that he will call me when he hits his draw, or he will shove into me if he hits his draw. So checking back has like all of the downside, but none of the upside of shoving the turn. If I check back, I'm still getting the same action from. Actually, has less upside because if I check back and he has like two paired another set, and the draw gets there, then he's going to be wary of putting the money in once the draw got there, and he's going to fold some percentage of the time. If the draw does get there and he has a draw, then I'm going to get stacked. So I'm going to double him up anyway. So there's really no reason to check back whatsoever because still going to get value. I'm going to get value from the same range of hands on the river that I am on the turn. So unless, of course, I get like the ace, or unless I get a board pairing diamond, and he has a flush draw, and we're talking about two diamonds left for that. So it's just, or I hit, yeah. So it's just not gonna happen very often. So we don't really need to consider that, too greatly. Anyway, not a lot of advantages to checking back, and a ton of advantages to just shoving here. So that's what I do. So all I can really do is hope he has a hand he can call me with. I think there's also the possibility of betting like half pot and hoping that a draw comes along. But I think I don't know. I'm not sure Barney is going to come along with a draw there, even if I bet like half pot. I just don't see it happening. He's just fairly tight. He's just not. Well, at least he is post flop. He's loose pre flop, but his win to showdown is only 18%. So he's not showing a ton of hands down. Okay, so ace jack, standard c bet. I expect him to fold here a ton, and he does. He just doesn't fight me for these things in position. It's great. So now I'm thinking I need to start 3-betting more because my c-bet in the 3-bet pot has been so profitable. So I decided to call with the old 10 deuce suited just because I've been so successful taking pots from him on later streets when he 3-bets me. So he leads into me, and I'm going to play this the way I always play in this spot against him, which is to float, except this time I have some serious equity to go with it with my flush draw. Now this is an interesting decision. He does go ahead and check, and there we go. He checks. And my floats have worked so well that I just wanted to keep it up. However, I think in this spot, since I have 12 outs, I really think that checking back is probably a little bit better because then I get to cash in on my equity, and I will never have to fold. I get to see a free river card. I can win a big pot, or when I can win a big pot when I get there. Or if he checks again, I can just bluff the river and take it down a bunch of the time there too. The thing that betting the river does for me is that if he checks and calls, it inflates the pot. So when I do get there, I can win a bigger pot. But also, he's never once check raised me in this situation. And heads up, I generally do not give people credit for an adjustment they have not made yet. Until I see them make an adjustment, I generally won't give them credit for it. Simply because most of the time it takes people far longer to adjust than you think it would. So if you readjust before they've even adjusted, you're just going to cost yourself money. So I do go ahead and just keep doing what I've been doing and betting. So this time he does go ahead and check raise me. He's clearly seen me. He's clearly seen me float him so many times and win the pot so many times in this situation on the turn that he knows I'm going to bet like every time, and he's ready for it this time. So he does check raise me. So it's a good play by him. He's making an adjustment to a move that's I've been really doing well with, and I have to fold off. I don't have the odds to call here, so I just have to fold. But now we've seen him make this adjustment, and we can act accordingly. We might be a little more careful with that in the future. But yeah, he has not been super quick to adjust to a lot of things. So I fully expect that whatever I readjust to, I can simply, I'll be able to use that play for a while as well. So the c-bet here is standard. Gut shot, backdoor. He folds a lot on the flop, ace-high board. So I turn a flush draw, which is cool. And then he leads into me, which he hasn't done this a ton. If you look in the third line of his stats, that DBF number, that's donk bet flop, it's only 3%. So means in 160 hands, he's done this 5 times so far. Just like so rare. Excuse me. Well, that's on the flop. We're on the turn. So I don't know if I've seen him check call donk and then donk bet the turn, lead the turn. He just hasn't done that very much, if at all. So I don't really know what to make of this. I think it's a little interesting, but if he has a big hand, why is he betting half pot? That's kind of the question I'm asking myself right now. Why wouldn't he be betting 2/3 or full pot? So the half pot just looked real weak to me. It looked to me like he, you know, hit a 10 and he wanted to set his own showdown price, or he has like hearts and he's trying to maybe bluff me. I don't really know, but I don't really think he has an ace because it's just not very consistent with what I think his MO is. I think he either would have check raised the flop or I think he definitely would have check raised flop with an ace. I definitely think he would have check raised flop with any pair. So I don't think he has a pair. And if he does, it's a 10. So I have so much equity here. I'm not really sure where I stand. I have all these outs, but like I know that 8 of my outs, or 6 of them, the 2 and the 6, is just going to slow things down on the river because the 5 is going to be kind of an obvious when the 4 straight's out there. There's not going to be a ton of value to get when there's a 4 straight on the board. So, and I'm not really sure like where I am, and I don't think my jack high is probably I don't think my jack high is the best hand, but I do have a ton of equity, so I decided to just throw in a pot raise here, just to get him off of whatever he's got really. And if he does call me, I have a ton of equity on the river. I have a ton of equity, and I'll hit my river card, third of the time. So I decided to just raise him off of it and keep my aggression levels high and keep my aggression high in different situations. I think that's important when you're playing an aggressive heads-up game. You don't want to be bringing the same aggression in the same spot every time. You want to look for places to distribute that aggression, and I think that's a good place to do it. I think a big semi-bluff raise in the turn, I think that's a really good spot for it. Because then it just keeps him guessing, and that's what it's all about. So I contemplate a 4-bet here, and I'm like, he's never gonna fold. One thing one thing I've decided after he called that huge 3-bet when I had the 3 jacks, I kind of thought that like if he just calls there instead of jamming, I thought it was very interesting that he called there instead of jamming, by the way. But it kind of made me think he probably would just call my first 4-bet, and that's why I'm waiting to have a big 4-bet hand before I do it. Because I don't want to... I have a feeling he's just going to call, so... So I just call here, and then I just fold. I'm not going to contest this board. It's one of those boards, it's like, I think it's very obvious to contest, and... I still think he's going to show up with the best hand there a lot. And then when he bet real fast there, I think that he had something decent. And then I'm not going to know what a good bluff card is, too, because he could, like, c-bet like an ace or king, and then I'm not going to know if that's a good bluff card or not. So I decided to just give him one. And then I also need to tighten up my image in 3-bet pots after he 3-bets, simply because I think I've been ripping a disproportionate number of pots from him in that spot, and I need to tighten up and just kind of solidify that image a little bit. And I thought that was a good spot to just fold. So he's checked twice. And now I think this is just kind of I just check it back here. I think I'd probably prefer a bet. I guess I didn't bet I guess I didn't bet simply because it's kind of an obvious spot for me to bluff, and we know that he's not in the mood to fold to me, and he thinks I'm kind of bluffy anyway, so he's probably not going to do it. But when the 6 rolls off, for all those reasons I just said, that means I can definitely value bet this when I'm checked too, like every single time. Plus, he never has a 10 here. He would have bet it by now. So I make a pot-sized river bet, and he's thinking, he folds. Yeah, considering how loose he is, playing almost an 80 VPIP, I don't think he's fighting for enough of these pots. I think if you're gonna play a VPIP that high, you better be incredibly aggressive post flop. And I don't think his level of aggression post flop really matches well with his pre-flop stats. I think he's just giving up on too many pots. But hey, that's exactly why I cleared out my schedule for the afternoon in order to keep playing him. Alright, so here was an interesting spot. I think that like this is an obvious c-bet for anyone playing heads up. And my ace high is good here a lot, so I float. Alright, so the turn's kind of interesting. He has been, he's picked up the aggression a little bit. He's double barreled a couple times in 3-bet pots. He check raised me that one time. So I'm thinking maybe now after seeing that, maybe he's like double barreling a draw here. I didn't think he would double barrel a 7. So I kind of either put him on like a draw or a 7. Or excuse me, a draw or an 8. And I have pretty good equity against draws on the turn. And he also has realized to not 3-bet me. Or excuse me, 3-barreled me really ever. So I think I can peel the turn and fold to a river bet here. That's not a line I like to use a lot because it gets expensive if you get in the habit of it and it can become a big leak. But I think this spot, it looked like a pretty good case for it. 6 is a terrible card. I think that I just need to check and hope that he gives up on. If he bets, like I don't think I'm good here anymore ever, and I'm gonna fold to a bet. He checks it back. He's got an 8, which he's gonna have a lot of the time there. Well, a decent amount of the time there, because he just doesn't double barrel me very often. So I thought that, definitely a possibility. I think with that river call, excuse me, that turn call of mine, it's on the thin side, but I gotta think that I really think it's probably a good one. It's close though. It definitely could be slightly minus EV. I would not put up a big argument if someone made a compelling case for that one. But at the same time, it's also good because it shows him. It does a lot of good things for my image as well and the metagame because it shows him that I'm not going to be folding. To him it might look like a really light turn call, and it shows him that I'm not going to be folding just because he's betting on the turn. I will call with bottom pair on the turn, and that makes him a little less likely to bluff me in the future, and that means I can be a little bit tighter in that spot going forward, which is cool. So when he checks the turn, I check the flop back just to control it, and I didn't really want to play a big pot when he check raised me there, so I just checked it back, and then I bet the turn for value, and he just folded. So I think about 3-betting here, and then I decide that King 9 suited, we'll just call. So I think about leading. I'd let out at him a few times on these dry boards as a bluff. I thought about leading to throw in some value hands into that range, but then just decided that since he had been folding, I don't think, it's really important to worry about to keep your ranges balanced, but you also have to keep in perspective your opponent's likelihood of exploiting him. And I give him like, I don't know, maybe a 4 or 5 out of 10 on that scale of how likely he is to exploit, some of my lines. I'm not incredibly worried about it against this opponent. So I was still a little worried that he would just fold if I bet. So as a result, I just decided to keep on, just give him some rope, let him bet. I can check and call here and get value from his whole range as opposed to, only the range that wants to call me. So now this 10 rolls off. So let's keep in mind here. I don't think he has a king. He just doesn't have a king very often. His range is so wide. So and he doesn't double barrel very often either. And he doesn't do it as a bluff very often, or that we've seen ever really. So I decide to just lead out here to get value from like all of his made hands that would have checked back on the turn if I checked. So like an 8, a 10, maybe even a 4. And the 10's a connecting card, so it allows me to represent like some draws and some stuff like that. So I lead into him to try to get value from all those hands that he wouldn't have bet himself. And yeah, he's gonna show up with a bigger king here occasionally, or like a 2-pair hand, but that's just the price I pay. I get so much value against the rest of his range that I don't mind when that situation happens. It's okay. It's still plus EV. So now I hit my 9, and I'm of course gonna keep firing here. That's a wonderful card. And the only draw he could have that got there is Queen Jack, or 6-7 was also open ended on the turn. So there's only 32 combos of those two hands, but there's a lot more combos of like random 2-pair hands. You got all these cards up. There's a ton of 2-pair hands. Better kings. There's a ton of those, etc. So there's just a lot to get value from here. And I know this guy is never going to raise this river without a straight. So if he raises, I can just fold. It'll be a very easy fold because there's no way he's going to raise this as a bluff or with a worse hand on this board. So he thinks for a minute, and come on, Barney, trying to make a video here. There we go. And he has ace king. So I definitely got lucky on that river, and we knew that was in his range, but a good result for us, of course. But again, that was all. We also ran right into the top of his range there, and escaped with a nice pot, which was very fortunate for me, for sure. But I think that regardless of the result, I think I like that line a lot against guys like this on boards like that. And he's LOLing me in the chat box. Yeah, you run so bad, Barney. Sorry to hear it. Yeah. Okay, we all run bad. Okay, so I'm giving him a hard time because he continued to give me crap for running well throughout this match. Even though, honestly, you look at how I built this stack, it wasn't from catching cards. It was from winning non-showdown pots against him. All right, so I think this hand's pretty self-explanatory. I bet the flop, bet the turn. He does a lot of he has a lot of the time he'll check and call the flop and then and then fold to the turn bet. His fold versus my double barrel is 50%. So I think that's just a pretty standard line with a hand like this. So now, but however, when he checks the river though, now we gotta this is actually a lot tougher decision. What's he just check calling me here with? He could have an ace, he could have a pair, he could have a 5. All of these hands that get to the river, like in this fashion, are going to be beaten by a pair of 10s or a pair of jacks, or 2-pair. He would check and call with like 7s through 9s, any 6, any 3, any 4, any 5, 4, 5, 5, 6, things like that, ace high. None of those, I don't think any of those hands are going to call if I bet this river. I think I can really represent that I've backed myself into one of these, the 10 or the jack. And if I bet big here, I really think he's going to fold a lot of these marginal hands. This guy has called me for 2 streets with thin hands, but he hasn't called me down for 3 yet. And that is something I'm definitely aware of because I haven't really triple barreled him. The times I've triple barreled him, I had a hand. So I think that I just don't think he's going to call me real light here. Yes, he's seen me be aggressive. He's seen me be very aggressive, and we do know that he has called me down with like king high. But that was for 2 bets. That wasn't for 3 bets, and that's a very important distinction because a lot of times people will happily make the light call for 1 bet. They'll keep it light for 2, but once they see that 3rd bet, that's often when they say, okay, maybe this guy's got it. Because they know that he knows I've seen him call him down light, and as a result, he thinks that he can take this check call line. I'm just going to give up, and no, that's not going to happen. So I make this bet pretty big because I do need to put a lot of pressure on him because I have 8 high. So I make it bigger than my normal value bet size, and I think the bet size is pretty important here. I think if I bet 200, I'm going to get looked up more often than 270, to be honest. So I just made it 270. I didn't want to go full pot. I didn't want to look like I was totally desperately bluffing him, but he turbo folded. So I mean, who knows what he had there? But um, I think his range there is so weak on average that I think just betting is mandatory. All right, so ace 7 off. Bump it up. And this was a spot. This was one of those spots I didn't think through 100%. And I think it's an all right bet, but like I think I have the best hand here so often. I don't really want to get check raised off of it. It's tough if I call a check raise. If I bet call a check raise, then I'm like bluffing. I'm bluffing as a float basically. So I think the move here, I think checking back's a little bit better. And of course he check raises me. So now I'm like, damn it, what have I got myself into now? Just clicked pot just to see what my 3-bet size would have been. And this card rolls off. And now he barrels me, which he hadn't really done yet. He hasn't really barreled me after a check raise. But I think here, I was thinking that he could definitely have a jack, but look how dry this board is, and he's been attacking some dry boards and some paired boards. So it's like he never has anything here. The jack is so. Uh, the jack takes away even more combos of a possibility of him having one, and he just hasn't barreled me yet. So I was just kind of suspicious, and I just was like, either I don't know if he'd barrel me with a 2 or a 3. I think he would check raise the flop with them and then give up. I have not seen him barrel me with a hand like that. So I wasn't really sure what to make of this. I thought he either had a jack or he had nothing, and he has nothing a lot more than that, a lot more than a jack. So I just called, and I called pretty fast. The reason I called so fast is because I wanted to induce a check on the river. I wanted him to give up on his bluff, so I like turbo called the turn to make it very clear that I had a hand. And I just checked back the river because I thought I was bluff catching, and in fact he did have a 2. Now, I thought that was very surprising, and I'm glad I showed this hand down because it gave me a very important piece of information that he's now adjusting to all, his him check raising the flop has worked just about as well as him c betting in after 3-betting me. I would just float him and take it away on the turn. So he's starting to take that play away from me, with his check raise in the 3-bet pot and now this. So it's an important thing to keep in mind. He's upping his aggression in response to mine, and he's starting to take a couple of these plays away from me. So very important to know, and we're going to have to keep these things in mind going forward. So we got King 9 suited. Make the call. And I'm throwing a note on him about that last hand. He's adjusted. Still making my note. I think the move here, I think I just fold here. I don't think. Yeah, I don't really see what I can do about this. I'm not sure he's gonna fold. There are a lot of draws. I'm not sure if he's gonna fold to a check raise. He didn't fold my last check raise. He's definitely signaling to me that he knows I've gotten out of line and he's been adjusting. And when I see one adjustment, I'm not really. I kind of want to tighten up a little bit, not get too out of line. I say that right as I 3-bet Queen 10 offsuit. But it's not bad. What I'm thinking here is I want to show him that I'm not backing off. And I think 3-betting him is a better line than check raising that last board because I've still been very successful mostly because my check raise didn't work the last time, but my 3-bets, he has yet to play back at me in a 3-bet pot. So I'm 3-betting here to show him that I'm not backing off, even though he has, made a couple adjustments. And obviously this is like the dream board against a guy who's playing pretty fit or fold in the 3-bet pot. And so I make my normal C bet, and he turbo folds. I'm mousing over the fold versus flop C bet in a 3-bet pot, which is the second stat on the second to last line, and he's folding to 80% of my C bets after I 3-bet. That is a huge number, huge, very very good piece of information to have on this guy. And that pretty much is the entire reason I 3-bet Queen 10 offsuit there. So I decided to throw a raise in right here. I checked the flop back because I got the gutter and the overcard, and I don't want to be raised off my ace high. I don't want to build a pot against. I don't want to build a pot when I have like ace high showdown value and have him, only to have him check raise like I did in the last hand. So I check back the flop, and then he bets the turn at me, and I think it's the last time he led the turn at me, he folded to a big raise. So I just made the same big raise here, and it's the kind of spot where unless he has a queen, I think he's going to fold because I can rep a queen very credibly when I check back and then raise it when it comes. So that was my thinking there, and he folded pretty quick. But again, I'm trying to take lines that I think will shut down most of his range, but also allow me to keep the aggression up. And throwing in a raise like that on the turn in that spot works pretty well for that. So now I decide to lead out at him. Again, he's folded to a bunch of my donk bets in the past, and again, I'm just looking for another way to keep the pressure on him. I'm looking for another avenue to show him that I'm not backing down, and this is going to be an aggressive match. So I fire at this very dry board, and he calls me pretty fast. And the ace shows up, and I decide to fire at it, even though he has some ace highs in his range. We gotta remember this guy's range, guys, 80%, and I think he has a lot of pieces of this board, and I think he has a lot of like even queen high, king high hands too. I think he could float those with the intention of either hitting the card or taking it away from me when I check. So the ace actually isn't that bad of a card for me because I can use it to get him off of like 5-6 or pocket fives or sevens or something like that. When I barrel here, I can now rep either a bare ace or I can rep even like a 2-pair type hand. So he doesn't respond real well to scary boards. He really does not. He has made light call downs, yes, but when I keep firing after the ace shows up, I'm representing a big hand. He maybe even 2-pair or maybe even a set. So I think I can get him off whatever garbage he floated me here with too, and I'm definitely gonna get him off like king high. So I make a pretty big C bet, well, decent sized turn bet anyway, and he just turbo folds. I gotta stop saying turbo fold. It's getting ridiculous, but it's what he's doing every time. Anyway, so 6-8. So in this match, I think Queen 8 is a pretty standard one, and this is a good hand. So look how fat he's thinking about his flop play. He's thinking about it, and he checks back. So think about that for a minute. Would he bet a flush there? Would he bet the ace of spades? I think yes and yes, definitely. First off, he needs to build his pot if he has a flush. He's never not betting a flush. And we also know that he semi-bluffs his draws because he's done it so many times. His flush draws, excuse me. He semi-bluffs those. So I don't really see how he doesn't semi-bluff an ace here. So to me, it's open season to fire. And I make it look like a value bet size, half pot bet. And I expect him to call me with like a random spade, like the 10 or something like that. I expect him to call with that, but I can probably get him off that with a double barrel. So it's okay if he calls. But he decides to raise me, which I find to be very suspicious, simply because he didn't bet the flop with his ace. If he has the ace here, how does he not bet that flop? So I think this is just like the biggest transparent bluff raise ever. Um, Add that to the fact that I've raised his turn leads a few times and he's folded, so maybe he's trying the same thing with me. Either way, he never has the ace here. He would have always bet the flop with it, like 100% of the time. So I can't call, obviously, because I mean he could still have like some awful pair that he's bluffing. I still have queen high. Keep that in mind. My hand's very weak, so I decided to throw in a pot raise. Maybe I make it a little smaller. I don't think the raise size matters a whole lot because I think he's going to fold 100% of the time. It needs to be big enough to make him fold a 9 or a small pair. And 280, 3x, that's going to get it done. So, and he folds quickly. Okay, so I think checking back is the play here, and that's what I do because we don't want to we're tired of getting check raised, and we want to be betting our air, and we want to be betting like hands we don't mind getting check raised with. So like draws, air if we're planning on folding, good middle pair hands, that sort of thing. So a hand like this is a good one to check back and try to take his flop check raise away from us. So remember last time we did this, he check folded the turn, but now he's check raising the turn, and that's interesting. It's the first time this has happened. Like he knows I think he's starting to figure out that I've been checking back some of my marginal hands that I'm trying to show down, and as a result, maybe he's check raising the turn. I do decide to peel just because it looks real bluffy, and I think I can just show the hand down now. I've got some showdown value. The club's missed. 5-6 missed. I think it's close between betting and checking. I do. I don't think he's ever going to put me on a king, and that's a big part of the problem, and that's a big reason I can't bet. Because I'm not repping a whole lot when I bet here. And if he has a pair, I expect him to call me, like always. And he definitely could have a king here. That's definitely in his range. So, having said all that, I think checking back is the play. I don't think I'm going to fold out enough. And it's up with a 4, and I thought that was very interesting. It's one more piece of the puzzle that he has. He's making some aggressive adjustments against me. Essentially what happened there is we know he check raises the flop with like any piece of the board, and now he's just moved that same play to the turn. And, it's not bad. It's not bad. It's something we just got to keep in mind. So I think this would have been a good board to lead. A check is okay too. I could take my check call lead line with this, and I guess that's what I was doing. A straight out lead on the flop would have been good too though. So I check it again. I'm trying to get him to bluff this king. If I bet at this point, he's just going to fold everything, and I'm not going to get any value from anything if I lead this turn. So I just need to check and call, get value from as much of his range as possible. And the ace, another not good card. There's really nothing I can do. I expect him to check back everything I beat, and if he bets, I'm probably just going to fold because this guy doesn't double barrel me like ever. And he has that, so that worked out well. But yeah, there's just really once the turn shows up, I think the line is real standard. I think the flop line can go either way. So I decided to bet this one, the ace high board. I decided to go full pot this time to try to discourage a check raise, and he does fold. I'm not going to play 9 deuce. We still want to make our hand selection part of our edge, which is not hard to do against a guy playing an 80 VPIP. We're getting a streak of awesome hands here pre-flop. Just going to keep folding them. Just got to keep, when you go through a stretch of bad cards, heads up, you just got to keep in mind what your overall image is, In this case, our overall image is one of aggression, in some cases very aggressive. And to capitalize on that image, we need to have some, we need to make some hands, and we need to be in there with pretty good cards on average. So being in there with deuce 4 isn't going to accomplish that. We need to be in there with hands we can value bet. So, it's important to, especially if your image gets out of control with aggression, that's the time you really tighten up and make sure you're in there with better than average cards than your opponent. Simply because if he's going to stop folding to you, you better figure out how to take advantage of that. And that's often by tightening up and playing for value. All right, so we can play this, though. And there are a lot of guys I would definitely fold Queen 6 against, for sure. The great thing about Barney is that he does fold a lot pre-flop. So even though my image is pretty aggressive, I'm not like out of control. It's definitely not out of control yet, and he's overall, I'm still getting the folds I want, especially on the late streets, and that's does give me a lot of flexibility. Okay, so I'm thinking here. We know we're putting his check raising range together. Now notice I bet full pot here again, trying to discourage the check raise, and he has just check raised me nonetheless. So that bet size worked one time to discourage check raise, which was, whatever. Now that we've been check raised, let's figure this out. He can have a king, yes. We also know he'll check raise any piece, so that could be a 5, it could be a 3. With his VPIP, they're all pretty evenly distributed. So, he's playing every king. Maybe he's only playing, 80% of the hands have a 3 in them or something like that. So, but between the 3 and the 5, he's got a lot more of those than he has a king. And then throw in all the pocket pairs. So, on average, his hand is very weak here. But there's not a whole lot I can do about it. And he has started double barreling after I call a check raise. Remember that. So, because I think he might double barrel one of these cards, and, even if he double barrels a 3, unless I hit my queen or my 6, I'm going to have to fold on the turn. And that's not really what I want to be doing. I could call and raise his turn bet, but then I'm going to have to put in a huge raise. However, if I just raise him right here, right now, I think I can fold him off of whatever crappy hand he's doing this with. And this board's just so dry, he just never has a huge hand here. I also have the other thing to keep in mind here, the reason I love a 3-bet is because the only other time I've done this, I showed up with a monster that I jammed the turn on him with. So, with that, I go ahead and just make a 3-bet here. Because he took away my float, so now we're going to make an adjustment and make a 3-bet. Come at him from another angle. If he's going to keep check raising me, I'm going to figure out a way to combat it. That is just a fact. But he does call me, which is obviously irritating. And it's one of these spots heads up where you're like, I can't believe he called me. So just admit to yourself the situation sucks and move on and immediately start figuring out what to do. So he did call me, though, just like he called the last time. So part of me is not surprised, but part of me is surprised because this board is so dry. So I guess he has a king here at this point. I just got to figure out what to do. Now, one thing to consider is that I think this is a really important piece of information. With this guy's, notice how this board is different than the last time I 3-bet his check raise. The last time was a drawy board. I had top set, which took away almost all the combos of him having top pair. And then even if he did have top pair, that ace showed up on the turn. The board was 4-7 jack flush draw, and the ace showed up on the turn. So when I jammed, even if he did somehow have top pair, it wasn't looking very good anymore. Whereas this is a completely different situation. His top pair is still top pair by a lot, if that's what he has. So I don't think there's any way he's going to fold to a shove. Not to mention, if he had a hand like 4-6 he just got there, if he had 5-4, 3-4, now he's open-ended, and that gives him even more equity. So I think I just have to give up here. I just can't imagine what I am going to fold out. I think it's a completely different situation than I think the board texture is a completely different thing than the last hand, especially given combo wise. So I just gotta check back and hope I hit a 4 is essentially what I do here. I hate giving up on big pots when they check me in position, but I think here I just got to suck it up, and that's what I got to do. The river is interesting. It's another king, which strengthens. I don't know if it changes a whole lot. It takes out combos of his top pair, yes, but considering I just checked back on the turn, he's never going to believe that I have a king now, because I would have jammed the turn with it, and there's even less combos of me. There's less combos out there for me to even have with when the king hits the river, and he knows that. So now I can represent, really, if I shove here, I can't represent anything. And, I hit the button, and I'm trying to figure this out. I I think I have to just check back here, is the bottom line. I feel it that that's the right play. He's got less than a pot bet. I just don't think he's ever going to fold to any bet size here. Ultimately, and this is a hand I don't like at all. I didn't. I put it together. I remember thinking this hand through. I remember playing this hand, and I put it together just like I just said it to you guys. But I basically just couldn't bring myself to just give up on a pot, and so I decided that if he's gonna fold to 600, he's gonna fold to 300, which is one way to look at it. The bottom line, I just can't really rep anything here. I needed to check this back. But this guy has been so tight on the river with me, and he has folded to so many river bets that I just couldn't bring myself to check the hand back against him. I just thought with a 5, if he has a 5, or if he has, pocket 7s, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. So I bet 330. I figured, maybe I can have, if I bet 330, he needs to fold, a third of the time to take it down. I honestly don't think that's going to happen. Looking at it now, I probably knew at the time that wasn't going to happen either. I don't like this hand at all. I think it's one of the worst hands of the match that I played. But I just couldn't bring myself to do it. He'd been folding so much on the river. And sure enough, so I make my little 330 bet, which I think is incredibly transparent. And if anyone who can hand read at all knows I don't have anything here. And he does check shove, and I just turbo fold it. I definitely made a point to turbo fold it, though, because I think turbo folding is a lot better than thinking about it and making it look like I actually folded some sort of hand, or trying to sell him on that I folded some sort of hand. Snap folding is going to open it up for me to, value bet the river in the future, knowing that I can 3-bet bluff him. He sees now I can 3-bet bluff him. Now I just have to wait for hand when he check raises, I can just make the same play and proceed from there, because I don't expect him to fold to another flop 3-bet of mine. So that's a hand I'm not proud of, and it was unfortunate. And it kind of, let him kind of build him up a nice stack that he's got some more room now, which is, another bad result. But again, it's tough to play an 800 hand heads up match without making any mistakes. But that's one of the bigger mistakes I made in this match. I just, I knew what the right play was. I just couldn't bring myself to not bluff. And you think about it, it's basically the same mistake as not making a tough fold, that is right, and just clicking, being like, I click the call button, make a crying call. It's the same. It's a similar kind of mistake. It's a weakness in your ability to do what is the right play, even though it's tough. But I think it happens to everybody from time to time. So let's all try, something to I think everybody can work on, including me. Okay, so we call the 8-7. The good news is that I built most of my stack from just, winning non-showdown pots. And I'm not too worried about my ability to just whittle him down again. So, I mean, partly because we're playing pot limit, and partly because Barney's just not that aggressive, that, whether we're 300 big blinds deep or 100 big blinds deep, the pace of this match is such that it just doesn't really matter a whole lot. Like, it's going to take a lot for us to play some huge. It's going to take a serious cooler for us to play some sort of huge all-in pot. He's just not that sort of opponent. So I decided to value bet this turn. I think there are a lot of draws he can peel with. I think that he'll peel an ace high. So I just bet for value. I'm raising this hand because it's suited. I'm betting this board because it's scary. And he just checks and calls for a change, which is nice, you know. Frankly, I've about had it being check raised. And I've, but I'm obviously here. If I get check raised, fine, I just fold. There's no like tough decision. There's nothing like that I have to really worry about. So like I said earlier, we're gonna be check raising. Kind of the medium to upper part of our range, and then all of our air, and then we'll be pot controlling the other chunk of our range. And if he figures it out, we'll just adjust. But like I said, I'm really not too concerned about being exploited by this guy. I think a really good player could put that together. Not that Barney's not really good at poker. I just don't think this is his best poker game. I should say a really good heads-up player could put my range together there, but that's not what it's really not what's going on here. So it's okay. It means it's more profitable in this spot to be playing a little more exploitive style. Nonetheless, you guys still do hear me talking a lot about, making sure my ranges are, fairly smooth, fairly consistent. And it's always important, it's always important having your thought process, no matter who you're playing. But you got to know when it's really important and when it's just sort of important. Okay, so he checks, standard 3-bet pot against Barney. He checks, he 3-bets, I call, he checks, I bet, he folds, standard. And I did have middle pair there to go along with my pre-flop float. So we flop top pair and a gut shot, and a flush draw here. And I decided to lead into him. And this is like I just talked about. I want to strengthen my leading range here. It's been mostly bluffs. And if he raises me, I'm fine with that. That's great. I mean, look how strong this hand is. Once he raises me, though, we got to remember that 3-betting doesn't do a whole lot for us, because I think he's going to call a 3-bet. Although after that last hand with the queen 6, he might call a 3-bet with like a 9 here. The problem is that I'm out of position, and I really am not going to know, unless a heart shows up, I'm really not going to know what cards I can continue on, and I'm not going to know where I am in the hand. He very well could have a better king. So I think calling is the play, just because like I have a big hand here, but if we build a huge pot, I'm always just going to have my kicker and my flush draw. And I don't really want to get 1,500 in the middle with, probably just 9 outs. So when I can call and then, realize my equity once I hit my hand and have some implied odds or something like that, I just don't really see a reason to play the hand this fast. So I just call. Not to mention he has some bluffs in there, in which case I'm going to win against those anyway. So the ace shows up. And I just check and call. There's really just no other reason to play the hand differently than this. And we don't hit the flush draw, which is unfortunate. And the 9... Let's see here. I don't think he would bet a 9 on the turn. So I don't really think he has that. If I bet here, I don't think he's ever folding a king. And if he somehow has an ace, he's never going to fold that either. What do I beat in his range? I beat his ace. I beat his bluffs. I beat his 5. And I know that he's only going to bet this river when he's ahead of me. So I can just check and fold. I don't have to worry about being bluffed here. And even if, yeah, exactly. And so he goes full pot at it. And it's just an easy fold. I just don't, from what we've seen from this guy, he's just never bluffing there. So I just check back. I know I have air, and we talked about betting all of our air, but with a board this kind of drawy, I just thought that he was just going to come along or check raise me too often. So I just checked it back. The ace shows up, though. It's a good card for me to bet. He does check and call. And I just give up at this point. And he just has a 7. I think when the 8 shows up there, I don't think he's going to ever fold a king. Obviously, he's never folding an 8. Hearts got there. So, like, the queen is, like, probably the only legit hand I'm going to fold him off of. And he has some sort of legit hand there a lot. So, the only thing that he's definitely going to fold is, like, maybe the 7 and definitely, like, a straight draw. But I think with everything else out there, I just think that those are too far in the minority of his range for me to do anything there. So I just have to give it to him. And I've learned my lesson about, I was definitely not happy with my play in that one hand, and it bugged me for a little while. So I'm definitely trying to be a little more careful. So check this one back again for all the reasons we talked about. Keep in mind, I do have a lot of equity against this range, even on a board this drawy and with that 9. So he leads in, and we just call. Not a lot of reason to do anything else. I think raising on a board this drawy is a little too thin. If my kicker was better, like if I had an ace kicker, maybe I could see it, or a jack even maybe. And I just give up. Or excuse me, I just check back. It's like, if he has a 9, we know we could bet a 9 there. He might call it with a 7, but that's it, really. I don't know if he'd bet the turn with a 7 either. So really, he's only going to call me like a king and a 9. He's going to fold his like missed draws and everything else, really. So there's really no value in betting. And sure enough, he had 5-6. Okay, so his min raise the jack 7 suited. And we get 3-bet, and we call. And we flop huge, obviously. So I decided to just go full pot at it. I'd love to get, the stacks are deep, and I'd love to just get this pot built. I still like min raising pre-flop just because I can call so profitably. Even with the deep stacks, I still like calling the small 3-bet. It just keeps the stacks even deeper post-flop by not inflating the pot. The SPR post-flop just stays very high. And whereas I would just be making it smaller if I were always raising pot pre-flop to 30 and always calling his 90. I think I would need to be throwing in some more folds against his 3-bets, whereas when I make it 40, when I make it 20, I can like always call and try to outplay him post-flop. Okay, guys, that is the end of this video. I picked a very inopportune time to pause the action, apparently. I apologize about that. So I'm going to have to leave you hanging on this one. But we'll pick this up with the third video. I'm pretty sure he just folded to this. In fact, I remember this hand, and I will double check that because I know this hand. You have to wait for Camtasia to save it. It spends like a minute saving before you can just immediately start recording again. So we won't have this hand in the next video, but I will double check in Holdem Manager to make sure that he folded here before I start it. I'm almost 100% positive he did. So nothing too exciting. But, all right, guys, I hope you enjoyed it, and let me know what you thought. Hit me up with any questions, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.